16 years old. Nevertheless, these young conscripts fought well, according to the paras, and surrendered at Goose Green only when their commanding officer realized the alternative to surrender was more slaughter by a determined 2nd Parachute Battalion. So miserable did they look that day that I seemed to want the Spanish for "Don't worry, you're well out of it." Monday, 31st of May. Goose Green is remembered, in my mind's eye at least, by 1,500 helmets scattered across the airfield, the remains of the surrender by the Argentine garrison 2 days before. To be remembered, too, by the smell of a battle still fresh, and by the piles of rifles and ammunition collected by the 2nd Paras as a kind of war booty. To be remembered, too, by the remnants of the Argentine Air Force on the island's 2nd largest airstrip, Pulcara ground attack aircraft hit by our Harriers as the Argentine pilots tried to escape. Pilots who died strapped inside their cockpits with the canopies still open. Goose Green is to be remembered certainly by its open-air napalm factory. There it was in the middle of the village, 32 100-gallon drop tanks made in the Argentine and filled with the evil stuff ready to be dropped from bomb carriers of the Pulcara aircraft on the airstrip. The mixing machines, the drums of napalm gel, the long, thin detonator, more empty tanks waiting to be filled. And at the edge of the airstrip, close to where the Pulcaras had been parked, we saw another 57 drop tanks. These were more crudely made, almost as if they'd been welded together in a hurry. But oozing out of the detonator seals, we saw the same white, sticky, corrosive glycerine gel with the familiar smell, burning the grass black where it dripped. There was even an Argentine instruction manual showing how the napalm mixture should be handled. It is highly volatile, like nitroglycerine. Tuesday, 1st of June, and Goose Green will be remembered for other things that ran counter to familiar Argentine propaganda. These people, 114 of them, residents of the village and a few farms around, were locked in this tiny church hall, not more than 200 yards from where the 32
troops, a part of the 5th Infantry Brigade. The Guards, who had begun their voyage from England in the QE2, finished it in landing craft, moving across the misty bay to advance forward, taking over from the troops already holding the grounds. All day there was a steady march of men, fresh men, ready for combat. This new landing, every bit as great as the first wave, doubled the number of troops ashore. Their arrival gave the British command a chance to regroup. By now, so many troops and supplies had come ashore that the beach and the tracks were a morass of mud, evidence of the weight of the British advance. But there's no intention of getting stuck in First World War trench warfare. The Gurkhas are already here, digging in across the island. Some of their forward positions are within sight of Port Stanley. The advance continues.
The battle zone, and she's now the first warship to return home.
Commanders. Some Argentine officers were able to pack their belongings into suitcases and leave their positions apparently in no great discomfort. Others, though, the young conscripts, were not so fortunate. Many of them were helped away from the battlefield with serious injuries. Others were left shivering and miserable in the freezing weather. Nearby, the bodies of some of the 250 Argentines who died at Darwin and Goose Green. Smoke from peat fires drifting across the moorland, it could have been a picturesque scene. But in these last days of May and in early June, it was most
machine gun the station before the troops landed. The Argentines landed illegally on the island in 1976 and have remained there despite a series of protests by Britain. The South Sandwich wounded were helicoptered to the field hospital at San Carlos. For others, it was too late. 250 Argentines died in the battle, 17 Britons were killed. Everywhere there were little groups of dead lying under ground sheets or lying on pieces of corrugated iron. A 1,000 prisoners were taken. They left behind, dumped on Goose Green airfield, great piles of helmets and rifles.
Deliver food and equipment. The planes are refueled in mid-air by supporting Victor tanker aircraft. It's the only way the Hercules can make the return trip to the Falklands. Our defence correspondent Christopher Wayne has been on one of the vital supply missions.
In the distance are the Falkland Islands and the purpose of this trip. We're going to be making half a dozen dropping runs over a DZ, a dropping zone, which is beside Sapper Hill, southwest of the town of Stanley itself. We'll be dropping from an altitude of 700 feet, and like all these operations, that's hazardous. So we have to wear special protective clothing, Mae Wests and survival parachutes. Now the sounds you will hear on the intercom will be the pilot calling action stations. 15 seconds later, the navigator will say red on, and that's a warning that the red lights have come on in the hold to tell the air dispatchers that we're approaching the dropping zone. 10 seconds later, the instruction green on. The air dispatchers will start to push the load pallets forward, and you'll hear the load master say load moving, load gone. And a few moments after that, these vital electronic spares will be in the hands of the Navy so that they can be taken out to the warships in the task force.
Action station. Action station. Steady, steady. Right to touch. Right. Right. Looking good. Right. Right. Red on. Red on. Green on.
Load moving. Load gone.
Red on.
Red on.
Light dash.
Light dash. Two good parachutes.
And you clear right. Left. Left. Red on.
Red on.
Green on.
Green on. One load moving. And gone. Two loads moving. And gone. Two good loads.
Red on.
Red on.
Light tag.
Lights around. Red on. Red on. Lights around.
The BBC crew were able to get the first pictures of Port Stanley airstrip since the final battle that ended the Argentine occupation. It had been damaged, but not put entirely out of action by British air attacks. Until the airstrip is fully repaired, the town of Port Stanley will rely on the Hercules for drops of supplies. The damage sustained by the Falklands capital is clearly visible, although it looks peaceful enough now. And the Falkland waters, which were the scene of the first Argentine invasion, are now used by ships of the British fleet. It's probably the last bit of the Falklands the Argentine prisoners are seeing before being taken home. We're retreating into the capital, giving up their positions in the surrounding hills under fierce attacks from paratroopers, Gurkhas and other units of the British forces. The Argentines had sustained heavy casualties and a Red Cross centre had been set up near the town, perhaps a little too close to the fighting for comfort. At this point, the Argentine film crew meet some British paratroopers. It's not clear at what stage of the surrender negotiations the pictures were taken, but a helicopter seems to deliver British officers. They're escorted by Argentine officers into the distinctive Secretariat building in Stanley, and the fighting is already over. On the beach, an islander is obviously delighted to see the paratroopers. By this time, there's no question that a ceasefire has been agreed, and the skies over Port Stanley are already beginning to clear.